processes that you went through being on our show. And I'm grateful for everything that you've shared with the listening audience today. Hey, everybody. Welcome to It Starts With Me. We've got a great episode today. You're going to be hearing from Russell Heath. He's absolutely amazing. He's a coach of coaches all the way over there in Maine. And what he does, he unlocks the mind. So you're going to love this. You're going to get a little sneak peek into my own mind as Russell begins to pull back some of the layers. So just wait. You'll see in a moment. So let us just remind everybody, every single Monday, we have a show with Michael Seville. It's on Mike's YouTube channel. Please check it out. It's all about what it takes. That'll be airing at 9 o'clock. On Wednesdays, 12:30, It Starts With Me. You need to be here so you can hear those testimonies of other people and how they gain knowledge to overcome. All right, and then we follow up at the end of the week on Fridays at 6:30. We will be here again for the Community Beacon. All right, Russell Heath. Let me tell you a little bit about him. The Russell Heath Coaching. He is the owner and the founder. It's over there in Maine. He's an evangelist for personal mastery. Mastery always starts with me. That's what he believed. So in his teens, Russell actually hitchhiked to Alaska. All right? Exactly. He lived in a cabin on the banks of the Tenacity River in his 20s and lived in Italy. Then he traveled overland across the Sahara, through the jungles and, savannas of Africa, and into Asia. In his 30s, he sailed alone around the world in a wooden boat. In his 40s, he wrote novels, and in his 50s, he bicycled the spine of the Rockies from Alaska to Mexico. He's worked on the Alaska pipeline. He's an environmental lobbyist in the Alaska legislature, and he's run a stored environmental organization fighting to protect Alaska's coastal rainforest. In 2011, he moved to New York City to dig deep into leadership development and now coaches businesses and nonprofit leaders intent on making big things happen in the world. He lives in a cabin on the coast of Maine and is building a boat that he will row around Newfoundland. This guy is amazing. Welcome to the show, Russell Heath. So how's your day coming along?
Well, you're the last one on the day, so it's been a good day. Looking forward to getting outside here and taking a walk.
Okay. All right. Very good. Very good. That's a good thing. Do you walk alone, or do you have a dog with you, or?
Careful. I have a wife. She and I walk together.
Okay. All right. Sounds good. Where are you at now?
So I'm in Maine, Eastern Maine. Yeah. Where are you? Where are you calling?
I'm in Florida.
Oh, probably warmer down there.
Yeah, it feels great. I mean, well, you see, I got short sleeves on, and I see you have long sleeves on, and a little jacket. Yeah. So that's awesome. Yeah. Very good. Very good. So, I mean, just like looking at what you do here, into the whole coaching business and everything. And by the way, happy belated birthday for you.
Thank you.
Yeah. And so I'm just curious. I'd love to hear more about, hitchhike to Alaska.
Yeah. So I was still a teenager when I did that. I left high school after 11th grade and bummed around for a bit, and then hitchhike up to Alaska. Alaska was always a dream of mine, getting up there. And back then, that was 74, right? So that was a while ago. And Alaska was very different then than it is now. It's just when the pipeline was getting started. It was still really isolated from the country. You didn't have an easy way to get there, and there was no telephone or telecommunications. Yeah, so it was a lot of fun. Stuck out my thumb and hitchhiked 4,000 miles up into Fairbanks.
4,000 miles.
Okay. You don't realize how far away it is until you hitchhike up there.
Okay, and where were you living at that time again?
You mean before I left or when I got there?
before you left?
So I grew up outside of Philadelphia.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I got to the interior of the state in Fairbanks, and I found this little cabin, 11 foot by 11 foot, down on the Tanana River. And I lived a winter down there. Wood heated in the outhouses, had to bring my water, had to hitchhike into town to get fresh water.
Oh my gosh.
That winter, it got 55 below.
Wow.
It's chilly.
No. That's freezing cold for me. I know it's not literally freezing, but for me, I feel like I would freeze.
55 below? Yeah, you would freeze.
Yeah. 55 below. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, 55 below 0
degrees. 55 below 0. Oh my gosh. Yeah. I would be the icicle somewhere out there in the middle of Alaska. Well, that's definitely interesting. Yeah. So, hey, tell me a little bit more about yourself, man. You said you're married. Do you have children? Obviously you've hitchhiked to Alaska, which is amazing. You have a few other things that are just like really interesting that you've done.
Yeah. So now, yes, I'm married, no children. My wife has 2 boys by a previous marriage, and they're out of the house. They're all launched in their adulthood. That was exciting to see happen. But yeah, I went up to Alaska, lived there for a year, and then went back to school. And after I graduated, I lived in Italy for a year, and then spent 2 years traveling around the world. I went down across the Sahara Desert, through the jungles, into East Africa, then back up through the Eastern Desert, through Sudan and Egypt, and then across to Asia. So I did that for 2 years, came back, and then went back to Alaska, where I got a regular job. And I made a decision. This was interesting. I made a decision when I was actually in Tel Aviv in Israel. So I just come out of Africa. I was really, really sick. I had dysentery, which is common in Africa. And I wandered the streets of Tel Aviv, not knowing what to do, desperately ill. And I kept saying to myself, why don't I just jump on a plane and go back home? My family doctor would fix me up and I'd be okay. And I'd be thinking, whoa, next morning I'd wake up in my childhood bed, and then what would I do? I mean, the existential terror of waking up in my childhood bed, I can't tell you how scary that was. And so at that point I said, all right, what I want to do is, I don't want a career. I don't want a wife. I would do a wife. Didn't want a marriage or children. Didn't want to live in a house in the burbs. I just wanted a life of adventure. So I committed myself at that point. For every year I worked, I'd have at least 1 year, if not 2 years off. So when I went back to Alaska, I got a job as a computer programmer, worked for a few years, then bought a boat and sailed her around the world. So I spent 4 years sailing around the world. I stopped and worked in Australia for 6 months. I left the United States with $5,000. I left Australia with $7,000. So that's what took me around the world. And then I got back to Alaska, and I thought, I'll try a different kind of adventure. And this time it was, I want to run an activist organization. So I ran a couple of environmental groups. Alaska is a beautiful, beautiful place. And if you come from anywhere else in the country, you'll see how it is. And I didn't want that to happen to Alaska. So led a lot of campaigns, made a big difference down there, protected the old growth forests of Southeast Alaska. And at that point, one of the things that I noticed was that I could only take my organization as I was personally developed. So I was the limiting factor in my organization. Usually you think that resources are your limiting factor, or how bad the bad guys are. But no, it was my leadership. And you can see that now as a coach. I see that any organization I look at, any company I look at, the limiting factor is always the leadership. Always the leadership. So I wanted to develop myself into a better leader. So I left Alaska and I moved to New York City. So this was back in 2010. And back in New York City, I got into leadership coaching. And there, they make a distinction between leadership skills, like how to give a good PowerPoint, and leadership development, which is a development of yourself. Your own personal abilities, your own growth is what's really key to leadership. And so I was doing that as a coachee. But what happened is that I couldn't find work in New York City. They wouldn't hire me. I think my resume was a little too odd for those people. And so I said I had to go into work for myself. So I decided to become a coach. So then it was in 2010 that it was in 2012 that I made the decision to become a coach. And so now I coach leaders all around the world.
Yeah, that's interesting. What's interesting is just how you got there. I definitely have this part of me, this innate desire to always search and seek out freedom. Right. And I think that's probably the thing that intrigues me the most about our conversation today is the way that you actually pursued it. You took no limiting beliefs whatsoever.
No, you'd be surprised, buddy.
Oh, well, then tell me more about that.
Yeah, well, my limiting beliefs were all around people. I had no trouble sailing around the world. I have no trouble climbing mountains. I have no trouble doing all those things that many people have, some fear or trepidation about doing. But my limiting beliefs were all around people. I just really shy and introverted. And that's what I said. It was a leader. It was my ability to go out there and make things happen with people. So that was what stopped me. And that was always been my struggle.
So this is a very interesting conversation, because many times people have this fear of being able to do whatever it is that they're trying, hey, I want to be a firefighter, and then they're afraid to go to school. They're afraid to go to the academy. They're afraid, hey, I want to meet up with this girl. Of course, they're afraid of the girl, they're afraid of the space in between them and the girl. There's a lot of different things that happen, but you're saying that your fear was mostly in the people, but in actually the environment, the struggle, the process, or the progress between yourself and your destination, as long as it didn't have to do with people, you were okay with it.
Yeah, totally. So, yeah, it's interesting. When you said you pursue freedom, what do you mean by freedom?
Very good. Very good. I love that. So for me, it's been more of a freedom of mind. And there's an old song for me, it's from SWV. And in this part of the song, it says, free your mind and the rest will follow. The colorblind, don't be so shallow. But the whole thing was about, freedom. And I found myself at one point in time, that's the reason why this program is here. It starts with me, was because I had experienced this type of exhilarating lifestyle where I was freed from my old self, and I had a way of doing things that probably weren't the best way. And I came in contact with God. And when that happened, it freed me. And I was like that for a couple of decades. And during that time, I got married, I had children, and then all of a sudden, I had a bad experience with one of my kids as they were leaving the house. And that experience set me it just hurled me into this despair, into this valley of despair. And I knew from 2 decades worth of life that this wasn't me. So I had everything that I needed to fight. I knew I needed to call somebody up and talk with people. So I reached out to mentor. I knew I needed to pray more. I knew I needed to stay focused on things that were positive. So I was doing all of these things, but I wasn't breaking out. I was becoming bound. And so at one point in time, I was, 6 months later, it took about 6 months, I had come to this point where I almost woke up and I thought to myself, wait a second, I know where I am, in my mind, I know where I am. I know what this darkness is around me. I'm in my own room. And I walked over to the window and I opened up the window and sunlight was coming through. I had barred up and boarded up the windows. I had stuffed towels underneath the door. I had made it so dark that you couldn't see your own hand, no matter how much your eyes adjusted. So I had done this to myself by allowing all my circumstances to affect me in this type of way. And of course, this room was symbolic of my mind. And so when I realized that all I need to do was open up the window, open up the door because I knew the environment, then I realized my freedom is based off of my own thought process. I can do or be whatever I desire to be. As long as I think it, I can do it. And that's how I got there. So me pursuing freedom was always based right there. And so for me, the more difficult part was sometimes, being able to cause my body to do what my mind understood was true. Does that make sense the way I said that?
Yeah, I'm not sure what you mean by your body. You mean physically?
Yes.
Like you wanted to climb a high mountain or climb a high mountain and you couldn't physically do it? Is that what you mean your body was limiting you?
Yes. So for 6 months, I wanted to be freed of these pains and these emotions and everything. And it was very simple. All I had to do is just let go. I mean, it was literally that simple. I forgave her. I forgave myself. I just let go of it. And I allowed other people to be other people. And I allowed myself to be myself. And I moved on with life. And all of a sudden, things just started happening. And I translated that into everything else, the things that you see now, the show that we have, hey, I want to do a podcast. Okay, we'll just do it.
Well done. Well done. And I really like to emphasize what you said about freedom, because most of us think of freedom as like we're unshackled. We can go do whatever we want to do. But where we're most shackled is in our mind. And the person who's free is free in their mind, regardless of the external circumstances. Right? And how do you become free in your mind? What is it that limits you? I mean, you said you boarded up the window and tried to keep everything out. What was it you were trying to keep out? Metaphorically speaking here, what were you trying to keep out of your mind?
Right. Very good question. And so for me, I guess what I was attempting to keep out of my mind, well, it's like there's a two-part to this, right, Russell? It's like, because we think that it's not always that you're thinking you're keeping something out of your mind. Maybe I was keeping my feelings on the inside, and I was attempting to keep hurt from coming into my room. But really what I had learned that I had done was I trapped hurt inside of my room with me. I trapped pain in the room with me. And when I opened the window, I recognized that there was freedom on the outside, but on the inside, I was barred up and I was locked up with all these bad, depressing thoughts and feelings and anxiety and frustrations. And I had just, I laid down and went to sleep with all those things, and I kept them with me instead of getting rid of them.
Yeah. Yeah. So one of the things, so again, I'm a coach. I work with people, like often leaders, sometimes not. But what limits them, what limits their freedom in their mind is almost always, when you really look down, you peel back all the layers, there are two things that limit people. One is the fear of being uncomfortable. So the fear of feeling painful feelings like failure, the feeling that comes with failure or rejection or embarrassment or shame. So the extent to which we try to block out the window, not let that hurt in, is the extent to which we shackle ourselves, we reduce our freedom. So part of growing, part of becoming free, and again, what I do with it as a coach, is work with people to be comfortable feeling uncomfortable. Because you can't have growth, you can't have challenge, you can't have love or connection without the risk of feeling uncomfortable or feeling painful feelings. So that's the first thing that I'd noticed. The second thing is, and it's related, is we see ourselves and we see other peer people in a certain way. So all of us has some kind of story about who we are. And for most of us, not all of us, for most of us, that story is some flavor of there's something wrong with me. There's something wrong with me, and consequently, I'm ashamed of me. So I need to hide that. So that's just a story we have for ourselves. And it started when we were kids, and who knows why it started. It doesn't really matter. The point is that you need to distinguish it. This is my story. I'm not lovable. I'm weak. I'm not good enough. I'm not worthy. Some story like that. You need to distinguish it, and then you need to start being able to put it to the side and acting independently of that story. Is that making sense? Are you tracking me there? How to work independently of your story that something's wrong with you. So those are the two things that in my coaching and my work, we most dig into, put to the side, and that increases people's freedom, increases their power, increases their ability to make their life the way they want their life to be.
That's very good. That's very good. So I'd love to be able to share. I didn't know that this was going to end up turning into a session like this, but I'm enjoying this. So for me, Russell, what ended up happening is that, because and this is my thought process, my philosophy on this. And I welcome you to say whatever you feel comes to you. I'm not ashamed of anything. So, but I had counseled so many people for 2 decades, counseled so many people, helped so many people through their stresses, their struggles. I've been through so many different ups and downs and everything. I myself actually had seen exactly what was happening before it happened. I got a dream in the middle of the night, and my dream was to the T. Exactly what was happening happened. In my dream, so this was the situation was between me and my eldest daughter. And my eldest daughter was swept up in a relationship with my father. And she was taken away, not a sexual relationship or anything like that, but just she looked towards him for whatever, I don't know. I never did get that out of her, but we are doing well together. Nonetheless, it's necessary that I tell you that so you can understand the dream. So in my dream, I woke up in the middle of the night, very vivid dream, and I'm laying in the bed and, head to foot, at the foot end, another 20 feet, another 30 feet, there's my restroom. In my restroom, the shower's there. A bug comes up out of the shower, and I see it. When it comes up, it's very small. And I go and I'm like, that's like a mosquito or something like that. I got to get rid of it. Not to mention, it looks like a really, really bad bug. Whatever this is, it does not need to be here. And so I went to go get rid of it in the middle of the night, and it just enlarged, and it got really big. And I couldn't control it. I don't know if you've ever seen that TV show, Alf. Oh my gosh, a long time ago, there was a TV show called Alf, so it wouldn't matter then. But the bug got larger and larger and larger, and I couldn't handle it. I could no longer hold it back. I thought it was going to bite somebody in the household, but I couldn't protect my household anymore. And then it turned into 1,000,000 bugs, and it swarmed on me, and it overcame me, and it went straight past me. It didn't want to have anything to do with me. It went out into it went out into the hallway, and it went into my daughter's room, picked her up, and carried her right out the window and flew away. And there was nothing I could do about it. No matter how hard I fought, nothing. I was so unprepared. There's nothing I could do. So what ended up happening about a month or 2 later, my daughter and I, we ended up splitting. There was a difference. The difference had to have already been building, but we were still working. But she didn't talk with me about it. And if I talked with her, there was a wall. So we needed an intercessor, but we never got one. So eventually, there came this one point that I believe is, this is the pinnacle of it all. This is where the two sides split right here. And there was trouble that came about. And I spoke with her and she spoke with me. And we had like this harsh, rigid disagreement. And from that day forward, we never spoke like that ever again. Never.
Even now?
No, of course. Now we're very good, but we never during those couple of months. Within the next couple of weeks, a letter showed up. She had changed her entire plans. She was moving in with her granddad, and within a couple of weeks after that, January 1st, I'll never forget it. I used to call it doomsday. During those 6 months, she got into the car that I had helped her pay for, and she loaded it all up, and her grandfather drove away. Mm-hmm. And so that was my dream. My dream was this unstoppable momentum that swept up my daughter and carried her away, and it absolutely happened. And so to know that it's happening, to see it happening, and to know that you can't do anything about it was very challenging because, fear of being uncomfortable, there was no fear of being uncomfortable. I spoke with everybody. I gave my heart. I put my heart out on the table for anyone to walk on, and they did. They did. Yeah. And then there's something is wrong with me. I went through that, but then I was like, well, if there's something wrong with me, I'm willing to accept it. I don't care if there's something wrong with me. I want this relationship to stay. And they rejected it. So in the end, she left. There was absolutely nothing I could do to stop this from happening. So it was destined for me to go through this entire trial.
Well, it sounded like it was destined that your daughter needed to leave. The question is, right, and it may have been for her own growth, as painful as it might have been for you. But the question for you is, what was it in you that had you go into that dark room and close that window of your mind after she left?
Yes. So it actually had nothing to do with her.
Yeah.
Had everything to do with my father. So that was the darkness for me. So to give you a little bit more as you're pulling this together, I can see you. It's like you have this puzzle in front of you and you're putting all the pieces together. And I love this. So my father had not been in my life for almost 30 years.
Uh-huh.
And I went and I found him. And so when I found him, he had admitted to me that he knew where I was some few years ago, but he never came to see me. Mm-hmm. He had a fear of what I would say, what I would do, or whatever. And so I accepted it. So I believed I accepted it. But when they joined together, I took offense to it because it said, what kind of father would deny his son? Mm-hmm. And so this erupted in this collision between him and I, and she was swept up in the middle of it because she was trying to get out from underneath rules. She wanted to become her own self. She wanted to birth into, and she was fighting for it. And this was the only way that she saw. But it was like this opportunity was being utilized. And him and I, on the other hand, we collided in a mega way. Because now I feel as if he left me when I was 3. He didn't return to me when he found me. And now that I've been with him for these last few years, he's taken my daughter away and he's rejected me. So my pain was all in dealing with him.
Yeah.
And the trouble with that, I suppose, if there was trouble, was that I knew all of this. I understood it every single day. I knew every drop of it. I knew the reason why he was acting the way he acted. I knew the reason why she was acting the way she acted. And so for me to be able to verbally tell everybody what was going on and for them to look at me and agree with me and still run the course was this unstoppable being that was just moving, ushering her out because it was destiny for this to happen. Now, if there's another piece to this puzzle that I missed, I don't know. There's still more that I think about, more that I understand that I haven't explained to you, but I want to hear more of what you have to say.
How about you?
About anything. I just like hearing you talk.
Yeah. Well, the question I'd ask you is, what was it in your understanding of your father that took away your freedom? Now, notice what I said. I didn't say, what is it about your father that took away your freedom? I said, what about your understanding, the way you saw your father that took away your freedom?
Yeah, so I don't think that it was the understanding of it. I think that it was all me. Like I limited myself. I completely did all of this to myself, and I wanted something that maybe it wasn't there. And because I wanted it so bad, I was willing to sacrifice much more than I was willing to tolerate. So it set me spiraling out of control into this despair.
Yeah. Well, sorry to hear that, but I just want to acknowledge you for pulling yourself out of the despair. I mean, good work. That's tough stuff.
Thank you. I mean, it's been a blessing. It's been, my father and I, we still don't talk. So yesterday was his birthday. I think it's today the 8th. Yesterday was his birthday. I called him, left him a message because, I've grown so much. And this whole process is what led me to this. It's like when I came out of it, Russell, it's like freedom. Everybody deserves freedom. They deserve to feel as if it's okay. And they have control in here and in here. They may not be able to control everything else around them, but they can't control these things. And if they can learn how to do that, then they have access to the world becomes their oyster.
Yeah, no, you're right. It's the freedom comes, they deserve freedom, but what they have to do is they have to work on it. It's not a gift, right? You got to do the work. And some of us have harder roads to travel than others. That's certainly the case. It sounds like you've had a difficult one yourself. And often those difficult ones, the more difficult the road, the greater the lessons, and therefore the greater the greater depth to which you can live life. It's sometimes that the gifts are in the suffering.
That's gold right there. That's gold.
I wouldn't want to wish suffering on anybody, but sometimes there are a lot of gifts out of it.
Yeah. Well, I agree with that. I don't wish suffering on anyone, so I agree with that. What do you think about just life? I mean, what is life?
Life is this extraordinary gift that we have. We have 70 or 80 years, right? We're like this little spark in this eternal blackness, right? And we've got this gift of life. And, some of us are dealt a good hand in life and some of us are dealt a bad hand. And really, you can't argue with the hand you've got. You've got the hand you've got, and it might be unfair, but your mission in life is to play that hand as best as you can play it. That's what you've got. If you've been dealt a bad hand, if you've been dealt disabilities, you've been dealt, you grew up in Syria. I mean, would you like to be a kid in Syria right now? It's not fair, but that's the way it is. So how can you deal that hand the best you can so you can bring some happiness and love and connection into your life?
Yeah, that's another powerful statement that you just made right there. And so how did you become the type of individual that would not allow borders in your world, in your mind? How did you bridge some of those gaps? And I don't mean with the people yet. I want to ask you more about that. but just as far as environmental structures and land masses and overcoming the mountains and the really scary things that we say only heroes do those things, the journey and the voyage. How did you do that?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I want to be clear. I don't, in some ways I think I was lucky. And one thing that I'm lucky is I'm, tenacity. I am just really tenacious, and you keep on going. So you go out and you get yourself all bloodied and you get knocked down and you pick yourself up and you clean yourself up and you do it again and you do it again and again. And I don't know where that tenacity came from. And, maybe I'm not as tenacious as some people. Did you ever see the movie Happiness, spelled with a Y, with Will Smith?
I probably have. I think I would have to look it up.
It's years ago. It's probably before you were born. I don't know, but it's a great movie for tenacity, right? The guy never quit. He gets knocked down over and over again. He has a little kid, and actually it's his son, his actual son playing the son in the movie.
The Pursuit of Happiness.
Oh yeah, Pursuit of Happiness. You got it right. That's a great movie just in terms of being tenacious and making something happen, right? And so that's key. Now that we use the word resilience, but I like the word tenacity. Just keep on going. And two is, I always knew at some level what I wanted to do. So a lot of people who come to me for coaching don't know what they want to do. And it's difficult when you don't have that kind of central driver, what it is you wanted to do. I knew from when I was 13 or 14 that I wanted to go to Alaska. I mean, there was no question in my mind, I wanted to go to Alaska. And so I did everything I could to get there, right? I left home with $200, right? And a thumb. That's what I had. And, and then one day I learned you could sail a little boat across an ocean. As soon as I knew that, I knew I wanted to go sailing. I'd never sailed before. So I think those two things really helped me, the tenacity and knowing where I wanted to go. Or the third thing is, I wanted to be married. I had a million relationships with women. They all ended up in some big, ugly fight. You got stomping away. It just disappeared. And so I got married when I was 67. That was probably the hardest thing I ever did. It took me 40 years of trying to figure myself out so that I could marry and marry happily.
This is great. So I took three things out of that, and the fourth one, I'm still processing the appropriate word. It just came to me. So 4 things out of that, just in words, and I'll give those back to you. So 1 was tenacity or tenacious, to be stubborn, to just pursue irregardless. Then you spoke on, you said that was almost like a gift. And then you said clarity. You started to speak about clarity. It was very clear. You knew exactly what you wanted. And that's what you help people to find. And I think that that's beautiful, because many people have no idea what they want. And I feel like it's more difficult in this day. I mean, I'm not that old, I'm 43, but when I was 18, we didn't have cell phones, and having a computer in your house, there may only be one, and it was dial-up service if you even were able to get that. So, and mom would kick me off she would kick me off. She'd be like, "Hey, who's on?" Because the telephone, and you just didn't have access like you do now. So you had less distractions. Your distractions had to be in your environment. And if you moved environments, you had less distractions or more. Where now I can carry my distractions everywhere I go, and I can pull my distractions out to distract me anytime I choose. So clarity is something huge. And then the pursuit of your clarity or of your vision. And then finally, patience, to just be patient through the process, to, as we would say nowadays, and one of the catchphrases of this day is to trust the process, and those are the 4 things that I heard from you that I assume you kind of bring to light to your clients. But what do you say?
Well, it's interesting, trust the process, because it became a coach. Before I knew about coaching, I didn't know what the process was. Like, it was like, you're floundering around fighting a bowl of spaghetti. You don't know how to get out of that, bowl of spaghetti in the darkness. It was crazy. You read self-help books, you read a million self-help books. They all make sense, but you can't move forward. You go to a shrink, you spend there going to a shrink. He doesn't do any good, or she didn't do any good. And it wasn't until I encountered coaching that I knew what the process was. And once I saw the process and I was in it myself, then I could start really making some big changes to my life. So process is important, but it's not clear. It's not really clear what the process is.
Have you found that while you're speaking with some of your clients that you can help them get out of their own way and clear the fields up so they can see their vision and they're doing well, and then all of a sudden they get distracted and they're blocked by something else, dragged down into some other despair? Has that ever happened where you had to help them help them become clear again?
Well, what I try to do working with a client, so coaching is not telling them what to do. Coaching is like pulling themselves out of themselves, right? And what I try to do is have them be able to distinguish inside them the thought processes that stop them, right? So what always stops us is in our own heads, or a story about ourselves or a story about other people. And once they've mastered that, once they see how they stop themselves, then when they stumble, when they hit an obstacle and they fall back into their pit of despair, they say, look at that. That's my behavior over here that we've already distinguished. I'll put it to the side. I'll choose this other behavior and I'll pull myself out of the despair. Despair is a pretty big word. I like to use breakdown. Doesn't quite have all the blackness around it. And we go into breakdowns all the time, especially if you're doing something big. If you're doing something challenging, you're going to have a breakdown all the time. The only way you don't have breakdowns is if you sit on the couch watching Netflix all the time, eating Cheetos, right? If you want to live a big life, you're going to have breakdowns. So the key is that when you have a breakdown, you don't stay in the swamp, right? Oh my God, I'm a bad person. I screwed up again. People are going to hate me, whatever. So, all right, what step do I need to take to get to my goal here? What's one action I can take to get me to my goal? And so I want to train them or work with them so that they can get themselves out of their own swamps, out of their own pits of despair.
So you look at what's going on, and then you equip people with the tools, both the tools to get out of their swamp of despair, as well as awareness, the knowledge and the awareness keys that they need to be able to recognize when they have entered into the swamp of despair.
Yeah, and awareness is key. If you don't have awareness, you can't do anything. You're just, you're a blind tadpole in a whatever. You can't see where you're going or what you're doing. So yeah, awareness is the first step. Self-awareness.
Very good, very good. And those, once again, that hinges on those same type of that same philosophy of gaining that clarity, and then afterward being able to pursue, and then just to be, patiently pursue. Sometimes you've got to be a little aggressive and sometimes you don't, but to be able to understand the process. And so these tools that you give them, were they the same type of tools that you uncannily utilized as you were going through life? And then later on you studied them up and realized, hey, I already knew how to do all this stuff. I just need to, kind of level myself up.
Oh, I wish. No, I was largely clueless. Come on, I was largely clueless. Here's a story. So I left home. I was essentially running away. I couldn't stand my parents, right? I probably did to my parents what your daughter did to you. I'm out of here, man. I'm out of here as far as I could. And it was even worse than that, Joel, because when I was young, I just closed out. I was like a clam. They could not connect to me at all, right? And so I went to go to Alaska, which is about as far away as you can get from Philadelphia without a passport. And I was like that into my 40s. And, no emotional connection with my parents. I don't like them. I mean, who put them on the planet? What a mistake. And then I went to a coaching program. So I was 45. It was the year 2000. I went to a coaching program. And it was a 3-day program, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Saturday night, I went in, picked up the phone, and called my dad. And for the first time in my life, I told him I loved him. And the first time in my life, I felt love for him. So he's crying and I'm crying. Then you get I was a clam. I wouldn't give them any emotion. Here I'm crying on the phone with my dad. I had no idea. In 48 hours, I was given tools. I learned tools that I did not know exist. And between you and me, I don't know why they don't teach these in kindergarten. It would save a lot of people, a lot of suffering. But no, I didn't have the tools. And again, most of those tools, they're obvious in retrospect, but they weren't when I was living it.
Yeah. That which brings more light to the saying, you know what you know, but you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah, right. Don't know what you don't know.
Very good.
A lot of my work, I work with leaders, but leaders almost always end up talking about their relationships. And so I ended up doing a lot of couples counseling or parenting, parent-child, or they're worried about their relationship to their parents. And, I reconcile a lot of people like I was reconciled with my parents.
Very good. I think that success to a great degree depends on the relationships that we build.
Well, we're social creatures. If you don't have good relationships, it's a pretty, I don't know, it's a pretty gray life without the relationships.
Very good. Very good. Well, I tell you what, I've absolutely enjoyed this conversation. I love it because I never know exactly which way we're going to go with the way that we set up our conversations nowadays. And your perspective is just so magnificent. I know that you're helping a lot of people. If you would what would you like to leave to the audience, and how could they reach out and speak with you?
Yeah, well, anybody in the audience who's feeling like they don't have enough freedom, right? Or particularly if their relationships aren't the way they want them. If the relationships have lots of conflict, or they don't have a lot of depth or love or connection, hey, give me a call. Let's talk. Because why go through it? You've only got 70 or 80 years on this planet. Why spend 1 minute in that gray, dark place when you could be somewhere else? Right? Your life can be so much more joyous and so much more happy and make such a difference for the people around you if you have a few of these tools, And it really helps to work with a coach. Even if the tools are given to you in a book, it's difficult because you still don't see your blind spots. You still don't see what you don't see. It really helps to have somebody outside of your head kind of say, God damn it, Russell, why are you thinking like that?
Very good. Very good. Well, Russell, I am truly grateful that you're on our show today. Had no idea that you were going to ask me questions and bring out my past.
Well, good. I want to acknowledge you for being so vulnerable and, putting it out there.
Yeah, well, thank you, sir. Thank you. I appreciate you. And I appreciate the jewels that you left with us as well on today. All right, everybody. So we had Russell here with us today, and he was absolutely amazing. The things that he just left with us about, being clear about whatever it is that you're going through. And once you gain that clarity, pursuing it with tenacity, it became very, very clear that this was something that was gifted in him, but also he gave a great understanding of you don't see what you don't see. Your blind spots is a very difficult thing to be able to detect because it is a blind spot. And finding a coach, somebody who is able to detect your blind spots, give you the clues and the cues to be able to get yourself out of your own way is very much key. So please remember, wherever you are, as much as it starts with you, it starts with me. Peace.